Hey, everybody, before we get into the episode, I just wanted to give a shout out to everybody watching, and I wanted to say thank you for the engagement. Thank you for watching and being a part of this. This has been fantastic, and we're on episode 18, which is huge. We're getting a lot of good information out there. So, this episode has some technical glitches in it on my end. Mike, I got a new camera, I got a new lens for my new camera, and something went wrong. I don't know what it. We did it tested fine. It looked fine during recording, and then when I looked at it at the end, it was just a mess. So Dr. Garry's side of it went perfect. So you're going to see him. You're not going to see me, but all the audio is there. I know that can be annoying, so I'm giving you a heads up ahead of time. A heads up ahead of time. That's redundant. Let's get into it. Love you guys. It was fun the first time I remember meeting you. I think the conversation you and I had, I must have used up two other people's appointment time because
No. That's one nice thing about radiation oncology is there's time to talk with people.
oh, that's nice. I don't think everybody experiences that.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, hey, everybody. My name's Jason. I am 53 years old. I have prostate cancer that's metastasized to my spine. And on this channel, we talk about it. Today, I have a guest, Garry Brown. Do I say DO or do I say Doctor of Oncology?
You can say whatever. It's all.
Well, I don't want to say whatever.
Well, the DO is the degree. The title is doctor. The only difference is that we learn physical manipulation in addition to the other things.
Fair enough. So Garry Brown, DO, radiation oncologist. And today we're going to be talking about the history of radiation therapy. So welcome to the show, Garry. Do I say Garry or doctor?
Yeah.
Garry. I'm already. Yeah. Welcome to the show, Garry.
Well, it's good to be here.
So I'm going to roll the intro and then we're just going to get right into it. All right.
All right. Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, you're welcome. Happy to have you. We'll see everybody in a second.
Welcome to Prostate Cancer, the road to recovery with Jason Stone, a stage 4 fighter. This podcast brings you support and insights from survivors, fighters, and medical experts. Join us for an educational and inspiring journey.
All right. Well, once again, welcome. And you had you and I talked, and we're trying to come up with, hey, what can we talk about? And what would be interesting to the listeners, and something that when we're trying to figure out what our treatment is, because it's really on the patient to do a lot of research and figure out what their path is. Sometimes one of the questions I have is, am I picking the newest and most advanced and best treatment plan? And there's a lot of different options within radiation, whether it's internal, external, proton, all these different IMRT, EBRT, SBRT, and there's a lot of acronyms out there. And, there's a history that leads up to where we're at now and what the newest treatments are and why they are what they are. I'm going to just kind of turn it over to you and let you roll with this.
Well, thank you. Yeah. What I usually go over with a new patient is, we talk about the staging of the prostate cancer, which you've done an excellent job on talking about the Gleason score and the Gleason's grades, which is important in making the decision as to how to treat a patient. And then secondly, in addition to the Gleason's score, you have to look at the workup to see if there's any metastatic disease. Like in your case, you had involvement in one of the bones in your lower spine. So that affects the potential, for treatment and the treatment options. Surgery would not necessarily have been a great option for that, because you wouldn't have necessarily cured it by removing the prostate. You would still have cancer cells left behind. And with the process has evolved incredibly.
Yeah. When it started off, we have imaging. You can get imaging now with your radiation therapy. And as I understand, they didn't necessarily have the same type of imaging when they first started off. And it was kind of a hunt and seek and measure things and cross our fingers. Am I close?
Right. And in certain types of cancer, cervix cancer, for example, the women's cancer of the cervix, there's an international staging thing, and it's simply based on the examination, because they didn't have all these fancy tests that we could do. And in the third world countries, they didn't have the imaging. So, they couldn't do CT scans. They didn't even have x-rays. So or barely had x-rays. So
Wow.
it's all changed. And even in the time since I started my training back in 1991, what we would tell patients then was that initially when they treated patients using radiation, they had cobalt machines. And the cobalt machines don't penetrate as well. So they just did a beam from the front and a beam from the back. So the bladder, the prostate, and the rectum would all get the same dose because all of that tissue is exposed.
Yeah. And some of those are more sensitive, like the rectum, the colon is more sensitive tissue.
Exactly. So as they got better equipment and high energy X-ray machines, they could do a beam from the front, a beam from the back, and then a beam from the right and the left. And they had what was called a 4-field box. So that box then got the full dose, but the front and the back and the sides only got half the dose. So outside that box, the hips were outside. So you tried to limit the dose to the hips so that you didn't get problems with your hips later on. And you tried to limit the dose to the bladder and the rectum with the APPA fields because, those side effects can determine how miserable you feel afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah.
In the 4 years I was doing my training between 1991 and 1995, the CT scanning improved remarkably. So we were able to we used to just do plain x-rays, and we would have a CT scan and we would project that CT scan up onto the wall. Then we'd have to draw lines on these plain x-rays that represented each of the cuts of the CT scan. And then we would have to use it was called a magnification ruler, and you would use the magnification of the X-ray and compare it to the magnification on the CT scan. And then you would plot, and you would put little dots, and you would have to plot where the prostate was in the seminal vesicles. And that was your target volume. And you drew with a wax pencil, you drew around that on the film. And then someone had to cut blocks out of that, out of cerebin. And those blocks were what was used, to determine the field size.
And so that had to be every time?
Every time. Well, no, just for the planning for each individual one. And then the physicist would take that information and plan, and he would only figure the dose right at the central ray, which is right at the middle of the field.
Yeah.
But since then, with the sophistication in CT scanning and the mathematics and the algorithms for planning, now they can plot the whole volume and determine the dose at each point. So they added beams. They did 6 beams. They did, beam from the right and left, beam from the front and back, and then a total of 8 beams. And then they would do lateral beams so that they would focus on the prostate, and that was called 3-dimensional conformal.
Wow.
And that started around in the mid 90s. And what it did, it would cut down on the dose to the rectum and the bladder, and also cut down on the dose to the hips. So they went from a dose of about 6,600 rads or centigrade to they increased the dose to about 7,200 rads or centigrade.
So it's more effective on treating the prostate cancer, but because it's coming in so many different directions, you're getting less dose to the surrounding things.
Exactly. So with that improvement, they got better results, end results, and better control of the prostate cancer, and keeping the PSA down, as an index. And then in the early 2000s, they were able to develop ways that they could do the individual pixels on each field, and that's called intensity modulated radiation therapy. So they're even more sophisticated in terms of prescribing the dose and the treatment. And there are multi-leaf collimators, so that rather than blocks, there's a device on the machine that moves and shapes the field during treatment. And that then allows for even more precise administration of the dose, and they're able to increase the dose even further. So they give somewhere between 7,800 and sometimes up to above 8,000 rads or centigrade per dose.
As a radiation worker, I find it incredibly fascinating that we're able to shape that field on the fly. That is just that's just amazing. Because, when I'm doing radiation work, or, I'm a supervisor of training, but when people in the line are out doing radiation work, they're getting a source, a point plane or whatever source, and it's just irradiating out. There's no shaping of it, so to speak. So that's how we think of radiation, as very direct, very linear, very it's either blocked or it's not blocked. But this is quite advanced in how we're managing to get the exact amount to the exact right spot down to that level.
It's precision, and the blocking is what spares the normal tissue.
That's awesome. So speaking of blocking normal tissue, how there was I think we're jumping around in the plan a little bit, but hopefully that's okay. There was a development that came out, and I don't know when Spacewar came out, but that's kind of what its function is, right?
Right. It's the Spacewar actually is in the last couple of years, probably in the last 5 years. It's been in development, but it's become more widely used in the last probably 3 to 5 years. And what that does, it's a gel that's injected between the prostate and the rectum to add just a few more millimeters of space, roughly 5 millimeters, that helps to decrease the dose to the rectum. With the planning systems, we can do that. And it cuts down on the rectal side effects, and it just makes it more precise in the actual delivery of the treatment, and it it has the potential to decrease the side effects.
That's awesome. And when you think so the gel is it's a water dense type solution. It's a hydro something gel,
Right.
And when we're talking about gamma radiation for radiation therapy, generally, that is a highly penetrating radiation. But water, any type of hydro, anything, has a high, what we call 10th thickness. And so it has a high shielding factor for, it's not as good as lead or something, but it doesn't take it only takes those few millimeters, has a big reduction in the gamma energy that's getting past the prostate and into the colon, the rectum area. So that is a phenomenal. I didn't realize it was that recent of a development.
It is. It's very recent, and the gel actually it's all in the time, distance, and shielding. The further away you are from the beam, the lower the dose. So just that little amount of space that's created is what creates that difference. The gel itself doesn't block the radiation, but it gives enough space that you can precisely target the prostate and spare the rectum.
Yeah, nice.
Incredible.
Nice. It is. I did have that done, so I was happy when I was getting that explained to me, when Dr. Loenda was explaining that to me, I was like, this makes complete sense. Oh yeah, this is brilliant. Right. Inject it. Let's do it.
Right.
But I struggle with the idea that some people don't get this done. So in the Facebook cancer forums, there are people say, yeah, I decided not to get the Spacewar. What would drive somebody to make that kind of a decision?
Well, some of the factors are the availability of people that are trained to actually do the procedure, because it's an injection, so it's often the urologists. Some radiation oncologists do it, but you have to have people that are trained to do it, because it's a really precise location that you have to be able to administer that gel.
Yeah, I remember they had an ultrasound wand going in the place, and to guide that and make sure that got in the right spot. So that was pretty wild.
Right.
I think I jumped into the middle of your plan here. I'll let you pick back up with the
other options, depending on the findings, in the workup and evaluation. In the past, when I was doing my training, all we had were bone scans. And the bone scan is a technetium scan done with a bone seeking agent that the technetium is tagged to, and that will show if there's changes, in the bone that suggests that there's the possibility of metastatic disease. But that's all we had to work with.
That's it. Not
Yeah.
biological tissue take up, not
No.
like the PET scan. It just the bone scan, and cross our fingers and hope we found it all.
Right. We didn't have the PET scans, and even the PET scans have evolved where they do the prostate-specific membrane antigen PET scan that works specifically for prostate cancer. That is, even more details are potentially available so that we can see if it's spread to lymph nodes or to bone or other areas. So all of those things help because that helps make the final decision. Do you do surgery or not? Do you do radiation or not? Or when you do radiation, do you do brachytherapy with seeds? Do you do radiation to the prostate and seminal vesicles? Or do you do radiation to the prostate, the seminal vesicles, and the lymph nodes in the area? So that all determines the extent of treatment that we recommend.
Yeah, I know my uncle went with the internal one, the break. I always say brachytherapy, but
Yeah.
brachy, yeah. He went with that, and where they implant the seeds into the prostate, and that gives off because of what they use. It's a gamma radiation, so he's radioactive. It's once again a highly penetrating radiation, but it's irradiating from the prostate, so the prostate's getting most of that dose, and then the energy's reduced as it goes out. But it's a great. It's an amazing idea to think that you can just stick something right into the cancer and irradiate it.
Right. And the amount of tissue that's covered by that local radiation is much, much less. So the penetration, like you said, it's mostly affects the prostate. Once that seed is there, it'll decay over time, depending on the isotope. And that radiation treats the prostate locally. And it's done, in order to do that procedure, you have to measure the volume of the prostate to determine how many seeds you need. And then you do the actual procedure. So it doesn't involve going in for a daily treatment like the external beam does. So there's pluses and minuses for it. But if you've got disease outside the prostate, then the seeds isn't as good of an option.
Yeah, that's where, like mine, with it's the metastatic spot, that 2 centimeter by 3 centimeter spot on my L1, that took a couple of those, the internal off. It took the surgery off the table, and which that was the one I struggled with the most, because there is, I think, for a lot of guys that find out they have prostate cancer, there is a desire, a want to do surgery to remove the primary tumor. And I struggled for a long time with, why not get that primary tumor out? Why not go after it, remove it, and be done with that? And then we can just do a radiation on the rest of it. But yeah, once it's broken out and it's spread and it has other tumors, the side effects of the surgery were, it wasn't worth the side effects to not cure the cancer, is where I landed.
Well, and when you do surgery and then do radiation on top of it, you have the side effects of surgery plus the potential side effects of radiation. So those are the factors that you have to kind of take into account when you're making those decisions.
Yep, very much so. Can you talk at all about so we went from the 90s, we went to the mid 90s. We've now got SpaceOAR, where we do better imaging now. We have more than just the bone scans. What is this stuff? What is proton treatment? What is all that about?
Well, protons are high energy particles, and they have what's called a Bragg peak, which you may have heard about in your work. But
Yep.
in the Bragg peak, they only travel a certain distance, so they don't have an exit dose like the photons do. Photons penetrate all the way through, whereas a proton stops at a certain depth. So when you treat with protons, you have to determine the energy that you need in order to determine how deep that proton will penetrate. And it's very useful, particularly in pediatric cancers where you want to minimize exposure to bone, or to parts of the brain if you have to treat the brain, or if you want to treat, like, say, ocular tumors, tumors of the eye.
Oh, yeah.
Spare as much normal tissue as possible. Proton beam is excellent for that. But the difference is there are few places that do proton beam, fewer places that do proton beam. When I interviewed at Loma Linda, which was one of the first proton beam accelerator in the country. And they did a lot of stereotactic brain type treatments with that. And they did some prostate, but sometimes if the prostate cancer was more advanced, they would treat with conventional radiation for the first 5 weeks and do the final boost part of the treatment to the prostate itself using proton beam.
Oh, wow.
So those are differences in treatment. There are more proton beam accelerator facilities available nowadays, but part of the difference is in the cost, and it costs as much as like 3 to 5 times as much for proton beam therapy as it does for photon therapy.
Oh, wow.
Because of the cost of the equipment and the training and the technology and the people that you have to have in order to do it safely.
Yeah, it's probably a lot like there's some guys that are out there because of where they live, they're getting a CT scan with contrast, and they're getting a bone density scan, and they're not able to get the PSMA PET scan either, because even insurances aren't completely on board with covering it yet, and it's expensive. It's many times more expensive and cost. It sucks to think that the insurance isn't covering, prostate cancer treatment or cancer treatment, and that maybe the financial aspect of this influences some people's diagnosis and treatment. That's also a stressor that people have to deal with, and it's frustrating, and it's unfortunate, but it's getting better. And it sucks that it's continues to get better, but I have faith that in the future it will be a lot better. We're on a path where it's more accessible. More people are getting trained to do the proton beam. More machines are accessible. I know they have that over in the Seattle side, where they have a fantastic proton beam center, according to what I've read online. And yeah, and then there's more and more people that are trained to inject the spacer and to do the PSMA PET scan. We have a PSMA PET scan here in the Tri-Cities that I think is fairly new, and it was nice to have.
Right. And it's all in having the isotopes available and the scans themselves. I mean, just the technology and the isotopes. So it's all changing. It's a continual process.
What kind of, you've been involved in some of these developments, like people in the radiation, the history of radiation, and the guy or the couple that created the brachytherapy. Lots of people in the industry and what things they're working on. Where do you think we're headed?
It's interesting. I was fortunate to have met Dr. Peter Grimm, who was one of the radiation oncologists in Seattle who developed the seed implant process. It was almost just an offhand remark of one of his friends from childhood that was a pharmacist I worked with in Olympia before I went to medical school, who said to me, he said, "You should do a rotation with my friend in Seattle who's a radiation oncologist," because I have a background in nuclear pharmacy as well. And he said, "With your nuclear pharmacy background, you'll speak the same language." Well, I did a rotation with Dr. Grimm as a fourth-year med student, and that's actually what kind of tipped the scale for me to go into radiation oncology. But Dr. Grimm and Dr. John Blaschko, Dr. Sylvester, and Tim Mate were the guys that their team developed the seed implant process. And they started the Seattle Prostate Institute that did a lot of teaching around the world for different doctors how to do the seed implants. And they taught the physicians, they taught the physicists, and the other personnel how to do the procedure. So
Oh,
they really
wow.
expanded that, worldwide. So there's a lot to that. So
Th-
it was a fortunate, just kind of a incidental comment, you know, helped me get into radiation oncology.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Um, sorry, I'm swapping up banners here. So on your notes you sent me, there is one we haven't yet talked about, hypofractionation. What is this? What are we talking about here?
Okay. Well, the hypofractionation is you have conventional radiation therapy, which is typically 180 to 200 rads or centigrade per treatment. And what hypofractionated radiation therapy is, you have a higher dose, so you don't have to give as many treatments. And there's actually formulas that radiobiologists can use to calculate the equivalent dose based on radiobiologic factors. And what they have found is that instead of doing like 40, for example, around 42 treatments for prostate cancer, they can increase the dose to say like 250 rads or centigrade from 180 to 200, and they can do it in about 28 treatments as opposed to 42.
Okay.
What it does is it makes it easier for patients. They don't have to make as many trips. The side effect profile is similar, and the effectiveness is similar. So they had to do studies to confirm that before they could actually promote that and start using it. But
Oh,
that
wow.
happened over the years, in the last 20 years, I would say.
Okay, because when I did my treatment, I got 28 doses to my prostate. So
Right,
I
exactly.
was in that hypofractionation time
Right.
frame. And so before, in the early 90s, I would have had 42 doses.
Possibly somewhere
Or
between 38 and 42.
wow,
So yeah.
I was getting pretty tired of it by 28.
But the same is true for breast cancer as well. And those are things that make a big difference in how people tolerate their treatment as well. Particularly when you
Yeah.
live in a rural area. I mean, you were probably close enough that it didn't take you that long to get to the cancer center. But I mean, some places where I've worked, patients could be 3 hours away, and it's 3-hour drive to the facility for, the treatment itself just takes a couple of minutes, but it takes about a half an hour a day in the department or so. Then you got to drive home. So you either do that every day, or you find a place to stay close to the cancer center.
Yeah. I got very, very lucky. It's a 15-minute drive from the house. I
Yeah.
took time off work and, I was getting treatment. You sit in that little waiting room and you're talking to the other people. And there was a guy in there, his wife was driving him every day, and they were driving an hour and a half each way, and he was still trying to work. And so it takes time out of your work. It takes just a mess. So I am very, very lucky that I have the treatment center that I have here, that I have the doctor, the radiation oncologist I have, Dr. Lewenda. And so there's a lot of people that struggle with those long hour those many hour drives, and I just can't imagine.
Right. And the treatment itself makes you tired. So when you're tired on top of that and have to drive, that really wears people out.
Yep. Now on my spine, so we have EBRT, which is the external beam, and then we have I'm looking for the name of it I know it's on here somewhere. The IBRT, the stereotactic SBRT. There it is. The stereotactic radiation you talked about earlier, where we can do it in 5 doses, and that's what I had done to my spine.
Yeah.
So that was the many beams. Why isn't that an option for the prostate necessarily? Is it because of the hips and the other things in the area?
In some cases, they're doing that. They use, for example, CyberKnife to give high dose treatments to the prostate, and they'll do it in like five fractions. But those are, again, it has to be, those patients have to have just localized disease. They don't want metastatic disease to the lymph nodes or to the bone.
Right. Okay. Because it's, yeah, I get that. And
Right.
every situation, and this is where there's not a cookbook of if this, then this necessarily. Every person, every situation, every where it broke out, how it broke out, how far it's traveled, is it how established the new tumors are, all of that plays into every person's individualized treatment plan. And we try and just kind of to categorize some of them, lump those in together. So because you're picking between SBRT, EBRT, IMRT, proton, cyberknife, all these different things. So you have to kind of funnel all these very individualized cases into these, here's your options for treatment plan. And everybody has to make those kinds of decisions. But it's amazing that we have those kinds of treatments.
Right. And those treatments have evolved also because, for example, with in the past, treatment for your spine might have been just an APPA field at 300 rads or centigrade per fraction over 10 fractions, and that would have been a typical palliative treatment for that. And that's all that they would have done. They wouldn't have done it in 5 fractions, and they wouldn't have spared all the normal tissue in doing that. And that again gets into costs and insurance coverage and those types of things. But you were fortunate that you had Dr. Luenda, and he does what's called integrative oncology, which is, I think if I were younger, I probably would have done that. I'm old and I'm semi-retired now, so it's kind of.
There's always time to change.
But it's probably more work than I would benefit from, or anyway. But he looks at the other factors that are important in oncology, and this is what I really like about your podcast is that you're looking at lifestyle things that make a huge difference. Your sleep quality, your diet, your exercise, all of those affect your quality of life, and ultimately, in my opinion, will affect your length of your life. And that's what it's about. And I think the only thing that would be better is if we could get young people now to be thinking about those lifestyle changes for preventing cancer and heart disease and diabetes and all those other things.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And one of the things when we had first met, we were in that appointment, you had a picture you showed me. And you had a theory, and you had talked about this idea of change, right? Because that's what we have to do when we're faced with this diagnosis. We have to make decisions about what are we going to change, if anything. So, what is your tilt theory?
My tilt theory. The tilt theory. It happened when I was age 50. I'm 71 now. So, at age 50, I wasn't having much fun, and I happened across this picture from Impromptu, which is a division of Hallmark. And it's a black and white picture, and it depicts this guy walking a cobblestone street. And there's a line of cobblestones, and it's taken from behind. And it looks like he's walking a tightrope on this line of cobblestones. And it occurred to me, maybe 10 degrees, if we've got good family, good friends, good people we work with, especially good people we work with, because we spend more time at work than we do at home a lot of times, at least until COVID.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. And it occurred to me that at age 50, if I live to be 100, I've reached or exceeded my half-life. So I decided I wanted to change something, plus or minus 5%. And I decided I wanted to have 5% or more fun per day, with the ultimate goal to have 100% fun per day. And you can't do that every day, but if you do things like that and you do it on a daily basis, it's like compound interest. It adds up. So that's my tilt theory. And I've used it for weight loss. At one time I was 295, and I have sleep apnea, so I've done those things. And,
yep.
worked at it. But it's just, losing 5% of the body weight at almost 300 pounds, that's just 15 pounds. Can you lose 15 pounds? Well, I can work on that. The idea of losing, 85 or 95 pounds, though, seems overwhelming. But when you break it down into smaller pieces, it's, one step at a time.
I like that. I like that a lot. And 5%. You look good, by the way.
Thank you. For an old guy.
so you've gone past the 5%. You've did 5%, and then 5% of what's left, and then 5% of what's left, and you're meeting your goal. You're achieving things, and 5% more fun every day. That's do something new every time. So you asked me what I was up to before we started this. Something I didn't tell you that I'm up to is I re-picked up an old hobby just recently. I decided I'm going to get back into model rockets. And when I say model rockets, I mean the big ones. I've got a couple of rocket kits, like the big rockets. So we've got there's a good club right here in the Tri-Cities, it turns out. There's a big launch site out here at Pasco that has a waiver to 9,000 feet. I've never shot a rocket to 9,000 feet.
Wow.
I think the highest rocket I ever shot was 2,600 feet. And now I've got a kit sitting over on a chair over here that's designed to hit 3,559 feet. And then I'm going to try and go 5% above that, and then 5% above that. I'm going to build a little bit bigger rockets every time.
Oh, that sounds cool.
It's that looking forward, right?
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught into thinking about our prognosis rather than thinking through the prognosis. And we have to think through the prognosis, apply the tilt theory to give ourselves room on the other end, room on the other side of all this.
Right. And that anticipation and the looking forward to that and the joy that you feel releases endorphins. And those endorphins strengthen your immune system. So you're benefiting, all around. Good.
That's fantastic. And I get to build rockets.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's about time to wrap this up. Any final thoughts before we sign off here?
Well, my own thought is just, there's kind of, some people will divide it into different aspects of health. I think we have physical health, we have mental health, and spiritual health. And if we can improve those by 5%, we're doing ourselves a lot of good. And my mission is to improve the collective effective health by 5%. And I don't know if we can do that, but it's a mission, and it's a goal. If we don't have a defined goal, we'll never reach it. So that's my goal.
That's awesome.
So
that is super awesome.
You're doing it by what you're doing, just recommending to people and educating people, and that's crucial.
Yeah, I wish there was more of this out here before I found out what I got, but I'm just glad to be able to help, and I'm seeing in the comments that a lot of people are actually learning and getting information from this that's helpful. So yeah, I'm happy to keep doing this. This is also one of those endorphin releases for me. So I feel better helping out. So yeah.
Well, and it's good from the standpoint of the educational aspects of it. You're teaching people how to do things. We didn't have this technology. I mean, we had a little snafus getting this thing going, but even with that, it's still incredible technology. Yep,
very much so. It's rapidly advancing all the time.
Right.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I really, really had a good time talking with you again today. I really, truly appreciate you taking the time to do this episode with us. And I want to say thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you for inviting me. It's fun. Even at 71, I can still. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. For everybody, thank you for watching. Put your questions in the comments. Let us know what you want to talk about next, and take care. Go do something cool. I love you all.